Alright guys, so I just watched this video from Freedom to Think. Alright. So I had a few issues, alright, with some of the stuff that he was saying in here. Alright. It's a pretty long video, so we're not gonna watch all of it. Alright. I'm just gonna focus on a few parts that I disagreed with. Alright.
Freedom to Think broadcast. This is another for our Free Thinker React series. I'm your host, Jeff, and today we got Tony Timpa. Not sure if you knew about this guy. Tony Timpa died after a police officer kneeled on his neck for 14 minutes. Tony Timpa called the Dallas police in August 2016 to ask for help. The 32-year-old white college-educated executive was off the medication he usually took for anxiety and schizophrenia, but when the 5 police officers arrived on the side of the road where Timpa was, they did not give him the help they needed. Instead, they handcuffed him behind his back, zip-tied his feet, and Officer Dustin Dillard put his knee and body weight on Timpa's back. The officer's body camera recorded Timpa crying for help, pleading with them, saying, "You're going to kill me," over and over again. After 9 minutes under Officer Dillard's knee, Timpa stopped moving. After 11 minutes, he went limp, then silent. The officers joked and laughed that he had fallen asleep. All was caught on the camera. They had been trained that keeping someone in the prone position under officer's body weight was dangerous, but Dillard knelt on Timpa for more than 14 minutes. When an ambulance arrived, Dillard could be heard on body camera video saying, "I hope I didn't kill him," and laughing. Most of you probably heard that for the first time. And that was a guy who called the cops on himself, needing help. And then they did all that laughing, and it resulted in his death. Meanwhile, on the other side, well, we'll get to that more later.
So, what's interesting here is that he just stated that they're taught that it's extremely dangerous to put all their body weight on someone for a prolonged period of time. That's basically what he just said. All right.
Pathology. Oh, that one's nice.
Now, I did just hear that for the first time. All right. However, there's an important distinction that we need to make here. All right. It is not fair to say that the protesters would not protest against this, all right, simply because, as you've stated before, the news would not play that clip. All right. So you can't blame the protesters for not protesting about something they'd never heard of. You know what I'm saying? You have to go to the whatever news channel it was that was supposed to tell the story, but they didn't. All right. Those are the ones you have to blame here. Now, of course, not all of them are going to protest for it. All right. I mean, that's a given. Everyone is different. All right. But by that same token, you also have to understand that a lot of them would protest for that. If you are protesting against police brutality, then you're going to protest for cases like that as well. Now, we are going to do a reaction to this video. All right. Burden, Riot for Me, featuring Mises. We're getting ready to do a reaction to that video. All right. Now, of course, it'll be a review because I've already seen it. All right. Plenty of times. All right. But we're going to do a review. We're going to break down the song. All right.
Y'all be tearing shit up on the same night, say I ain't right.
I can't say it. I can't say you're not right, dude. We've been watching this for years. People are crazy. And they're run by communists and the globalists.
Now, here's the interesting thing about that. He's been watching this for years, right? But he might think that he's been watching this, but he hasn't. because the next video I watched from him was Samson's Nancy. All right. And there he said he tried, like after years and years and years of not watching mainstream news, he tried it and they turned it off and decided never to watch it again. All right. So whatever news broadcast you're watching, you're apparently are just taking their word for it and not even looking into what the other side is saying. All right. You know, they always say there's two sides to every story. If you're only getting one side, you're only getting half of the truth. All right.
So it's like a professional agitation squad. Whenever we have this happen, we're like, all right, go get everyone going crazy. And half the people, well, more than half the people that have gone crazy are these white liberals, the allies. Because Black America is fleeing Democratic Party, the defund the police movement. They don't want any part of that crap because their people.
So here's the issue I have with this. All right. This is divisive rhetoric. All right. So all liberals are not exactly the same. So you have to keep in mind, with these terms, is not the whole story. You know the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover? All right. If you're going to say liberals are this, liberals are that, conservatives are this way, that's reading a book by its cover. All right. You cannot do that.
Are in trouble. Their communities get devastated with crime, looting, and all that. And it's really racist to assume when you go rioting and looting that the businesses are not owned by Black people in the community, because a lot of them are.
Keep in mind, this is speculation. All right. Because he can't know what they were thinking. All right. He can't know that they were assuming these were all white owned businesses. All right. So yeah, speculation right there. Now, I will agree though, if anyone was doing that, assuming these were all white owned businesses or whatever else, then yes, there's the issue there. All right.
Because it's a great country with opportunity for everybody. Mind blowing.
A lot of those businesses were owned by Black people. All right. And they did not deserve to have that happen.
I ain't right. Say I ain't white, let's say that I'm black. Get pulled over, try to run away and scrap. Reaching for the strap, but he get it first. So I slug him in the face at the same time that it bursts. Now I'm just another reason to ride a name on a shirt. When the truth is I just got what I deserve. When you playing dumb games and you...
Here's the problem with this. It seems to me that they falsely assume that every single time someone gets killed by police, it was justified, right? They were doing something wrong, and that's why it happened. They were trying to run from the police, that's why it happened. They weren't listening, that's why it happened. It doesn't always happen that way, all right? You take the case of Tyree Nichols, all right? Apply that same logic there. What was he doing that justified what happened to him? It is not always justified. All right.
Win a dumb prize, less it's whites killing blacks. They don't give a fuck who dies. When you...
Okay, the intensity. I'm like, it's just after 6, but I'm way amped up.
On the other hand, I also have to throw this out there because I know some people might hear that and think, oh, wait a minute. Sometimes it is justified, and it's really sad when that happens. All right. You know, there's a few factors that we have to keep in mind here. All right. People being paranoid, people being scared, people having bad reactions to drugs. It could even be prescription medication that they took, or they mixed with something and didn't realize what was going to happen. All right. They start flipping out, cops come, bad things happen. All right. So sometimes, in order for, the police have the right to protect themselves too. All right. So, we can't go around saying another person was shot by police, we need to start protesting. No. Let's find out the information first. Let's make sure that this was not justified. You know what I'm saying? Uh, so to clarify, all right, these two arguments can go too far either way, all right, very easily. And we should not let um, a few biased media coverages to tell us what actually happened, all right? We should go and look into it for ourselves, all right? Um, Instead of just hearing one person talk about it, say this was horrible or this was justified, find out for yourself.
Attacking the police, like all of these things which lead to your demise. In the Floyd incident, he was on enough fentanyl to kill an elephant. Okay, so that right there automatically kind of nullifies the whole thing.
No. If you walk up to a cliff and you see someone hanging off the edge of it, all right, I've never killed a man before. I want to see what that feels like. So you walk over there and you start stomping on his fingers, right, until he falls off the cliff and dies. Later on, when they come to you and say, hey, you just killed that man over there. And he says, he was going to die anyways. He was already dead. He just didn't know it yet. Guess what? It's still murder. You cannot do that. And the reason why is because he could have survived if you would have reached your hand down and helped him up. But instead of doing that, you decided to play out some kind of fantasy that you had of killing someone. Okay? So, no, this is not an excuse. If you see someone dying of an overdose, that is not your opportunity to say, I've never drowned anyone before. I would like to do that. He's dying anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. Yes, it does make a difference, because instead of doing that, if you call for help, if you set them up, make sure they can breathe, do something, right? You could potentially save that person's life. So this whole argument right here is completely void. All right? Just because you think someone is dying does not give you the right to kill them. Okay? It doesn't. The other thing we have to look at is the protocols, which we are going to look at. All right? Use of force protocols. That is a thing. These are guidelines. And we're going to look at Minnesota guidelines for use of force. These guidelines is what these cops were under guidance of. All right? And as you have just stated previously, they were trained that it is extremely dangerous to put all your body weight on a suspect for extended periods of time. So how could you assume that one police department has that training that, oh, we know that's dangerous and we shouldn't do it? They did it anyways. Over here, same situation. They knew it was dangerous, but they did it anyways because they did not care. All right. Now, I am sure they do have protocols for when you see someone in distress or see someone who you think is in need of medical intervention. Okay. I'm pretty sure the protocols for that is not to uh, squash that person until they stop moving. Like, that's not a thing. All right. Also, the entire time he was on the ground, he was handcuffed. All right. He was barely moving whatsoever. Um, you know, the other thing that he brings up is the fact that he was already saying he can't breathe when he was struggling inside the car. What you need to look into is panic attacks, anxiety attacks, that kind of thing. All right. Because from my understanding, that's what was going on here. He was scared. He was panicked. He was paranoid. All right. Uh, that can definitely make you feel like you can't breathe. Okay. So just because he was having some kind of panic attack and said he couldn't breathe in the car doesn't mean he physically couldn't breathe when the guy was kneeling on his neck. So I am pretty sure the protocol does not say if you see someone in distress or you think they're having a panic attack or a drug overdose or whatever else, it's okay to put your knee on their neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Like that, yeah, that's perfectly okay. Sure, why not? Yeah, that's just as good as medicine right there. I mean, if they're having a drug overdose, like that'll fix it. All right. They won't have a drug overdose anymore. You know what I'm saying? Is that really the theory here? That they were helping him by doing that? I also have to wonder if he even watched the videos. All right. Like, if you didn't, go watch the videos. I mean, even Kanye West had to take back some stuff he said about this. I mean, Kanye West 1 minute was like, "Oh yeah, they didn't do anything wrong, this and that. His knee wasn't actually on his neck." Then someone had to tell him, "Go watch the videos." He went and watched the videos, and guess what? He had a complete different story after that. You know what I'm saying? Uh, so whenever you see someone trying to spin this thing around, like what you hear on Fox News or something, like, it doesn't work. All right. The idea that he died of an overdose. I mean, just think about the coincidence of that. Yeah, he died of an overdose while the police were killing him. That's quite the coincidence right there. You know what I'm saying? How convenient for them to try and take away from what they did. You know, we didn't kill him. He died from an overdose. No, that's not what happened at all. All right? They're just trying to shift the blame so that they don't get in trouble. And it didn't work. All right? Uh, I mean, you do realize the trial was televised, so you could go and watch the entire trial. All right. I haven't watched it, but I probably should at some point. So I will probably be making videos about the trial once I actually start watching it. All right. So what I'm thinking about doing is doing a reaction to both of their opening statements from the state and then from the defense. All right. Now, of course, keeping in mind, I do know that the first autopsy they did was not accurate whatsoever. They had to order a second autopsy from an independent lab, and that's when they got the truth. All right. Another thing that we have to consider, all right, is the body weight of an individual and also their tolerance levels. All right. Um, as you become an addict, your body becomes more and more tolerant to it. Okay. This is a proven fact. Now, this is where a lot of addicts get into trouble when they quit for a while and then they start back up again and they start with what they were taking before they quit. Okay. Uh, and then they overdose and die. All right. This is the trouble they get into because they don't realize that a gradual increase over time, their body gets more and more adapt to it. Okay. Um, so you have to make that distinction. You can't just say, "Oh, this would kill." This would be enough to kill this person or that person, right? There's a lot more that goes into it than that. I mean, looking at body weight alone, like this was a big dude. You know what I'm saying? So we don't know how much it would have taken for him to actually overdose. We don't know how much he was taken before that. We don't know. So we can't really speculate on what it would have taken to kill him or anything else. We don't know. All right. What we do know is that what those cops did was wrong. Simple as that. Now, the other thing I see all the time, all right, is, well, he was not a good person. He was a criminal. He was doing horrible, horrific things, right? So, by that token, that argument, right, let's take George Floyd out and let's put a woman who is a prostitute in his place. Cops did the same thing. Everything was exactly the same, right? But it happened to a prostitute. Then you hear people saying, yeah, but she wasn't a good person. She was a prostitute. Who cares, right? Then you're like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense, though. All right. It's about what the cops did. It's not about her. It's not about, what bad things she was doing. All right. It's about what the cops did to her. Like, it doesn't matter who it would have been. It's still wrong. The police are not the judge, jury, and the executioners. Okay? We have a judicial system for a reason. So yeah, I mean, by all means, if you want to defend the cops and say they were completely, everything they did was right and justified, show me in their protocols where it says they were allowed to do that. Also, a clear distinction to make here. So also, you can't bring up the fact that, oh, they were trained to use these types of chokeholds, right? That may be, but the time those chokeholds are applied is the essential part here. Not whether they were applied at all right? It's the duration of the chokehold. Now, you can put someone in a chokehold for a limited amount of time. You can let them go and they'll be perfectly fine. All right. It's the duration that matters. If you apply that same chokehold for 9.5 minutes, that person is not going to be fine after that. So, if you're going to cite that and say, oh yeah, were they trained with this? Pull up the documents, all right? as exactly what I'm getting ready to do. Pull up the documents where it shows and explains how they're trained to use these chokeholds, and then read every bit of it, because then you will see this is just long enough to gain compliance, just long enough to subdue the suspect. Once they're subdued, you are then to get off of that person and sit them up so they can breathe. All right? It's as simple as that. This is not hard stuff to understand, okay? But if you keep watching nothing but biased news coverage, then you're limiting the knowledge that you could be getting. Now, his channel says freedom to think. I'm exercising my freedom to think right now. All right. I'm not trying to take away his freedom to think either. He has the right to think whatever he wants. Only thing I'm doing is I'm trying to reach out to him and say, hey, wait a minute. Some things you're thinking and believing are not accurate. All right. So hopefully everything I've said does come across that way. It's not meant to, step on anyone's toes. It's not meant to, you know, make this guy mad and upset. I'm not like raging at him or anything. The only thing I'm doing is I'm shedding some light on a few things I think he's gotten wrong. That's it. Just trying to have a conversation. All right. Now, by all means, if you want to have the conversation, I'm right here. You know what I'm saying? You let me know whatever you think. All right. It's as simple as that. So now, let's go ahead and review some of the protocols that these cops had to abide by. All right. All right, guys. So, clear distinction right here. This is from 2022. Okay. So, I don't know how much this might have changed since this actually happened. So, it says when the following circumstances exist. Okay. Reasonable force may be applied when specific circumstances exist. Okay? In effecting a lawful arrest or in an execution of a legal process or in enforcing an order of the court or in executing any other duty imposed upon the public officer by law. So basically, if you are trying to hinder the police officer from carrying out his lawful duties, then he is allowed to use force. All right. Now, does that mean they're allowed to use whatever force they want? Absolutely not. All right. And that's something we're going to get into. All right. When used by any person to prevent the escape or to retake the following escape of a person lawfully held on a charge or conviction of a crime. So basically, it means use of force is lawful if the person is resisting arrest, if they are actively fighting the police, if they're doing anything like that, then yes, use of force is available to them to use. All right. So now we get to what's really important here. All right. Limitations on the use of certain restraints. A peace officer may not use any of the following restraints unless Section 609.066 authorizes the use of deadly force to protect a peace officer or another from death or great bodily harm. Now, we're going to take a look at that section, all right, once we're done reading here. A chokehold. Tying of a person's limbs together behind a person's back to render the person immobile. All right. All right, so I got to read this again because I'm trying to put everything that this is saying here. I'm trying to put it all together. All right. A peace officer may not use any of the following restraints unless Section 609.066 authorizes the use of deadly force to protect the peace officer or another from death or great bodily harm. Now I'm seeing what this is trying to say here. All right. So, in order for you to be able to use a chokehold, you have to be under threat of great bodily harm or other people and a serious threat of great bodily harm or death. Okay, so chokehold is not something you can just deploy because someone is resisting arrest. Okay, tying of a person's limbs together behind the person's back to render the person immobile. Also, not something you can do unless there is a serious threat of great bodily harm to the officers, to other people nearby, or whatever else. All right. There needs to be a good reason for them to want to deploy that tactic. Securing a person in any way that results in transporting the person face down in a vehicle. For the purposes of this subdivision, chokehold means a method by which a person applies significant pressure to a person to make breathing difficult or impossible, and includes, but is not limited to, any pressure to the neck, throat, or windpipe that may prevent or hinder breathing, or reduce intake of air. Chokehold also means applying pressure to a person's neck on either side of the windpipe, but not to the windpipe itself, to stop the flow of blood to the brain via the carotid arteries. Now, so if you understand what this is saying, it becomes perfectly obvious what has happened here. Okay? Look. Chokehold also means applying pressure to a person's neck on either side of the windpipe, but not the windpipe itself. On the side of your neck is something that you cannot apply prolonged pressure to, because it will stop the flow of blood to the brain via the carotid arteries. Okay? So, I don't know what exactly has changed from then to now, alright? But I'm pretty sure it has not changed that much. If it has, you guys let me know. Alright, so now let's go ahead and take a look at this section right here. So this is limitations of use of certain restraints. So this is going to be the exceptions to these guidelines we just read. Okay? Authorized use of deadly force by peace officers. All right. So keep in mind, the section we just read before was saying that applying pressure to the side of someone's neck is deadly force. Okay? So this is now going to tell us when that amount of force is applicable. Deadly force defined for the purposes of this section. Now, before we even get into it, what I'm going to say, what I expect to get out of this is that even when these restraints, these chokeholds, whatever else may be, when it's that tactic is available, right, for the officers to use, the duration of those chokeholds, of the restraints, that all matters. So you're only allowed to use those in order to subdue a suspect. All right. Once they are subdued and they are in handcuffs, right? The chokehold stops. The pressure on their back, it stops. Everything stops at that point. You now have them under control. All right? They're handcuffed. You set them up. Then you start going through the process, right? Figuring out, are they just being detained? Are they being arrested? What's going to happen after that? Then, if they are being arrested, then you get them in the squad car, you take them to jail. It's as simple as that. Just because at a specific moment in time that some of these tactics may have been applicable, doesn't mean that from that point on, like, it's all justified, because it's not. All right. It just doesn't work that way. These are rapidly evolving situations, and you have to respond appropriately to whatever situation you're in. Okay? You can't deal with a suspect a certain way or assume he might do something wrong because someone else did something wrong to you a week ago, right? That is not this person. You can be more weary and you can be more on guard, but you have to give them the same amount of respect as everyone else, the same opportunities to comply, right? For the purposes of this section, deadly force means force which the actor uses with the purpose of causing, or which the actor should reasonably know creates a substantial risk of causing death or great bodily harm. So if you deploy any of these tactics, you have to bear in mind this is very dangerous for the person you're applying this on. All right? So you have to keep that in mind. The intentional discharge of a firearm, other than a firearm loaded with less lethal munitions, and used by a peace officer within the scope of official duties, in the direction of another person or at a vehicle in which another person is believed to be, constitutes deadly force. Less lethal munitions means projectiles which are designed to stun, temporarily incapacitate, or cause discomfort to a person. Peace officer has the meaning given in section 626.84, subdivision 1. I don't think that's really necessary to get into right now. All right. You know, but by all means, if there's anything in here you guys don't understand and you want me to get to, let me know. I mean, we'll pull it up and we'll go through it. All right. Provision 1A, legislative intent. A legislature hereby finds and declares the following: that the authority to use deadly force conferred on police officers by this section is a critical responsibility that shall be exercised judiciously, and with respect for human rights and dignity and for the sanctity of every human life. The legislature further finds and declares that every person has a right to be free from excessive use of force by officers under color of law. That term, color of law, I'm not familiar with it. So, if you guys know more about that term, let me know. All right. The use of deadly force by a peace officer in the line of duty is justified only if an objectively reasonable officer would believe, based on the totality of the circumstances known to the officer at the time and without the benefit of hindsight, that such force is necessary. So, in other words, in order for this to be justified, it's telling you right here, only if an objectively reasonable officer would believe, based on the totality of the circumstances known to the officer at the time and without the benefit of hindsight, that such force is necessary. So then here comes the question: would a reasonable officer believe this was necessary? Right? Absolutely not. The man was handcuffed. He was subdued. All right. Even taking that a step further, once he passed out, how much of a threat is he to the officers, to nearby bystanders, to anybody else? How much of a threat is he after he's passed out? Zero. Absolute zero. How much of a threat is he when he has, I think it was what, 4 cops on top of him? Had 3 on top of him and 1 holding his legs. All right. How much of a threat is he at that point? None. Again, zero. While he was up struggling with the police, okay, keep in mind he was handcuffed even at that time. So it wouldn't have been a complete zero, but it was very, very low. All right. What you want to watch for, right, is he could grab someone's gun, right? That is a possibility. That's something that the cops would be on guard for, understandably so. But the man was handcuffed, all right? So the chances of him being able to grab someone's gun is like virtually none. You know what I'm saying? So, that's the entire purpose of putting them in handcuffs, right? So that they can't fight. So yeah, even still, the risk factor once he's in handcuffs is very, very low. All right, definitely not enough to justify the treatment that he got. All right, I think possibly. So what could have happened was that they didn't realize that even if these chokeholds and restraints are justified, it doesn't mean from that point on they're always justified during that encounter. because they're not. All right. So once that person is completely subdued and the risk factor goes to zero, then you're no longer able to keep applying those tactics anymore. You can't. All right. And you shouldn't want to do that. The other part here that a lot of people just completely write off and they don't comprehend it, right? Because they just don't think about it. So let me give you a scenario, right? I'm going to put you in a scenario and you tell me what you would do in response to it. You get in a fight with a guy that's a lot bigger and a lot scarier than you, right? He's winning a fight in the beginning, but a few of your buddies jump in to help you, right? You guys tackle him, take him to the ground, and in order to gain compliance, to get him to stop fighting, you put your knee on his neck and press as hard as you can, right? Then some people walking by are telling you, you got to let him go, right? He can't breathe. You're killing him right now. What's your response going to be? In all seriousness, are you going to say that you would just keep applying the pressure? I don't care what they think, they're wrong. Are you willing to risk your freedom over that? Because keep in mind, if that guy dies and you're applying that pressure to his neck, what's that going to look like? All right? It's going to look like you killed him because you were applying that pressure on his neck the whole time. Or would you jump off of him and say, hey, I'm not, I'm not trying to kill him. I'm just trying to keep him from fighting us. Like, this is in self-defense. I'm not trying to, do anything wrong here. All right, this guy was attacking us. I was just trying to get him to lay off of us. All right, isn't that what you would do? What a normal person would do? Especially a cop? The guy was in handcuffs. And the crowd was telling him, you're killing this man. Did he care? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, even after they checked his pulse, he still kept his knee on his neck. When the ambulance came, the ambulance driver had to escort him off of George Floyd. Like, if you seriously think what these cops did was justified, go watch the video. All right? As heart-wrenching as it is, go watch the video before you keep telling people what these cops did was justified. Okay, here we go. Here's another important factor. All right. To protect a peace officer or another from death or great bodily harm, provided that the threat can be articulated with specificity by the law enforcement officer, is reasonably likely to occur absent action by the law enforcement officer and must be addressed through the use of deadly force without unreasonable delay. So what this is saying is that you can't just speculate, right, that, if I didn't intervene, this might have happened, that might have happened. You can't just speculate that, right? There has to be something that you can specifically say, this was a likely outcome if I hadn't intervened, right? So basically, what this is saying is that you can't just speculate and say this could have happened or that could have happened, right? You have to be reasonably sure that if you hadn't intervened, those things really could have happened and probably would have. All right. That's what I'm getting out of this. All right. So y'all let me know what y'all think. All right. That's it for now, y'all.